It's very clear to me that we need all three. I get quite shocked when I sit in on the discussions because the delegates who work very hard and work long hours are treating this as if it was a trade negotiation, and they're repeating their party line, and there's very little movement and very little trust. So we have combined my foundation, the Mary Robinson Foundation Climate Justice, with the World Resources Institute to launch a global climate justice dialogue. And this is to open up spaces to really talk about equity. What does it mean for African countries? What does it mean for the AOSIS countries? What does it mean for indigenous people? What does it mean for China, India? What does it mean for the business community that knows, the more progressive business community, not the fossil fuel lobbies, knows that we have to make quick changes. I hope that people have read and are shocked by the World Bank report, Turn Down the Heat. What are we on about? I can't believe that we haven't got a greater sense of urgency. The young people I've talked to here at the conference are utterly frustrated. The civil society is utterly frustrated. How do we make a difference? I think, I've been thinking about this a lot, and ministers who've been flying in for the last 2 days, who will be coming in to be involved, have no pressure on them. They're here for a kind of climate science Doha meeting, and nobody knows quite what they're talking about because it's too complicated. And they can go back to their countries and nobody will ask them, what did you do in Doha that will help to save the world, basically? Now we need to change that through a broad dialogue.
Well, you tell us, how as a former president, how do we put the heat on politicians?
The way you put heat on politicians is by talking about people and talking about urgency, that it's undermining livelihoods, that it's going to displace up to 200 million people by 2050, and it's already displacing, that it's hitting even the rich countries now, the United States, with drought in the western part, and Sandy. Sandy is not going to come every 100 years, it's going to come much more frequently, and it's going to come to countries that don't have any plan B or any insurance or any FEMA to bail them out. So it's by massive mobilization of people, so that the next COPs in 2013 and 2014, and in the decision in 2015 on the Durban platform, an agreement, you have thousands of people outside the gates, outside the doors, inside the doors, and really saying, this is the most urgent decision that can be made. Stop all this repeating your cliches and not getting out of your positions. It's just not tolerable.
How do you see this dialogue you're talking about? How can that feed down to people on the ground? People who, we know the youth groups here are passionate about this issue, but we also know that people, perhaps back in your home country and mine, you speak to your average punter in the street, they will know what we're talking about.
I think more and more people do kind of know. And I'm glad to say that when Ireland takes on the presidency of the EU for the first half of next year, there's going to be a conference in Dublin on hunger, nutrition, climate justice.
Right.
And we hope that that will feed into the G8. There's a lot of discussion between the British and Irish governments about having food and nutrition, and I hope climate change in the G8, which will be in Northern Ireland. And so I think we need to link constituencies that don't always link, because this concerns all of us. Small island states that are sinking, and countries like China and India and the United States and Japan are all in this together. As somebody described it the other day, it's a sinking ship, and if the ship sinks, we all sink. So we better get aware that this is a huge issue that affects people more and more. I see it every time I'm in a developing country now. People say to me, we are already coping with this. We're trying to both adapt and mitigate. Poor communities. My friend Cecilia Klein, who was with us here from Kenya, she has 400,000 in a network in Kenya who've promised to plant 5 trees each because they're trying to mitigate. Why are we not more engaged in the richer parts of the world that are more responsible? There's a justice here and an issue, but to make it more people-centred is the main objective of the dialogue, and then to increase the urgency and the ambition. We are not on track for a safe world.
In the developed world, have we lost our idea of what justice is? Do you think that people have, obviously we know what courts are and the police are, but have we lost a concept of what justice really is?
I do feel that inside everyone is a basic sense of fairness and justice. I think we know what justice is, and I think if we were more concerned about justice, we would rebuild a trust. The problem here is there's very little trust, and there's a lot of kind of taking positions because of the lack of trust, and playing politics because of the lack of trust. So I hope we do understand, and there are many ways in which we can address the equity. A lot of people, when they talk about equity, think, oh, they're talking about common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Yes, we are in mitigation, and we must acknowledge historic responsibility. We must know now that the major emerging economies are the major emitters. So they will be the historic responsible in a few years' time. So things change, but we have to acknowledge that. But there's also equity in adaptation. How do we move quickly to help those communities that are having their poor livelihoods undermined? We're helping them with development aid and we're undermining them through climate change. We have to get real about adaptation. What about transfer of technologies? Poor people have a right to develop. What about the 1.3 or 4 billion who have no electricity, who have only kerosene and candles? And the 2.6 billion out of 7 billion, a huge proportion of our world, still cook on charcoal and firewood and animal dung and ingest fumes that kill about 2 million people a year. So we can do something. For the first time ever, we have the gadgets. How do we get them to people so that they can benefit from the transfer of technologies? And then, very importantly, we need equity in finance. We need to see all countries contribute as best they can, and the richer countries, whether they're Annex 1 or not Annex 1, contribute far more. And I hope that this region will take its full responsibility in that regard.
Okay, and I guess finishing on a slightly brighter note, tell us a bit about the sort of gender inclusion in the text here, because that, I sense, has been a rather large achievement, which perhaps hasn't been recognised too much outside these conference walls.
Yes, I must say I'm very pleased because my foundation helped to establish a troika of women leaders building on the 3 presidencies in the 3 previous conferences, with a lot of other women, with UN Women, with the Global Gender Climate Alliance, and we discussed the possibility of strengthening a 10-year-old decision which isn't working to increase women's representation on all the bodies of the UNFCCC, including the Green Climate Fund, the Technical Committee and all the other bodies, and also the delegations are very male-dominated. And I'm very glad to say that this was taken into the SBI, and there was a wonderful negotiation. You know, I sat in on that negotiation for about 5 hours, and you had, you know, India, United States, Grenada, Mexico, Pakistan, you know, the Philippines, all of these countries, China, Algeria, all saying, we have slight differences, but we respect because we want a decision. And the negotiators negotiated a very robust, good decision, which puts gender on the agenda of the next COP for the first time, has a workshop, we'll be discussing, and has gender balance in all the bodies. It's illustrative of what could happen if we had the goal of solving this problem, that was a shared goal, instead of being a disputed, mistrustful area where we're losing time. But this decision will go before the COP, I hope, for ratification without discussion, because it's been, you know, it's been negotiated and there's a really good text. And I think it's something we can build on over the coming years. Why is it important to have women there? I'll give you 2 very practical reasons. One is women are instinctively more intergenerational. I talk a lot about my grandchildren. I talk about them as being in their 40s in 2050, and what kind of world will they share with 9 billion others. Women are intergenerational, but we're also very practical. We know what it means when agricultural land is shrinking because of no proper seasons. We know what it is when water is becoming more scarce. We know how it affects other human beings, mainly women. And I think it will increase the urgency when we have more gender balance in the delegations and in all the bodies of the UNFCCC. And that we have to work on now once this decision is passed. And I think it will really be an improvement. So yay, that's one good thing that's happened at this COP. And I must say the presidency of the COP made